What is good, everybody? It's your boy Jay in the building. We're back again with another video. And before we get this video started, I want to say shout out to all you guys for the love and support. And if you guys are watching this for the first time, you guys are here for the first time, make sure you guys like, subscribe, comment, and share with anybody and everybody that loves HBCU sports in its entirety. So I definitely appreciate you guys. And first and foremost, I want to say shout out to Hugh Jackson on becoming the new head coach for Grambling State. He hasn't even been on the job for 48 hours, and he's already been putting in work. He's been going after All-American JUCOs at quarterback. He done already offered 2 All-American quarterbacks to scholarships already. And when I look at the video and the highlights, Grambling State will be a very different team if he can get either one of those 2 guys. Exposure over experience is a theme that I kind of want to keep this on. I want to keep that theme going for the duration of this video. And before I can even get to my point of that, we got to start from the very beginning. And the beginning is when Coach Prime became the new head coach for Jackson State. And you can tell how serious he was about changing the culture of HBCU sports. Not just football, but sports and how HBCU sports is looked at. And before that could happen, you got to go into the sport that everybody really loves the most, and that's football. So Coach Prime, if you hear it in his press conference, he speaks about, bringing 3-star, 4-star, and 5-star recruits to Jackson State. He talks about turning the guys into professionals, not just professional football players. Talking about getting degrees and graduating and becoming Jackson State the place to play football. He really made himself out to want to be the next Nick Saban, the HBCU version of Nick Saban. And right now, we can arguably say that Coach Prime is damn near the face of college football right now. If not, he's definitely on the rise. He's definitely on the list, right? Definitely climbing up the charts. And you can just tell by his press conference and what he was saying that he was genuinely sincere. He ain't had nothing written down. He looked at everybody in the crowd and he meant every word he spoke. He didn't have to speak about he didn't even speak about his football career. He didn't even speak about the past of Jackson State and their history. He was focused on the players that he was gonna bring onto Jackson State. He focused on the goal at hand. He was focusing on these kids' futures, and he meant every word he said when he talking about. Look, he already accomplished one of them. Well, a few actually brought 3-star, 4-star recruits. He done already got a SWAC championship under his belt in his first full season. And, but a lot of people were kind of shunning him during the spring season, not knowing that a lot of the transfers that he had transferred to the school couldn't play in the spring season. Including Shedeur Sanders. Look, Shedeur, he was on his way to Florida Atlantic. Like Shedeur Sanders, he done already signed his letter of intent. He was on his way to Florida Atlantic. And when he realized that he was coaching at Jackson State, so they said, he did a whole U-turn and said, he's going from Florida to Mississippi to play for his father. Shiloh was in South Carolina, starting as a freshman. He was starting for an SEC school as a freshman. And you know what he did? Transferred to Jackson State. And a lot of players went along with him. Like he got so many 3-star and 4-star recruits. It made everybody in the SWAC jealous. Made them jealous, if not envy him. And what I mean by exposure over experience, I'm not talking about Coach Prime, because he was coaching high school football. He was coaching at Trinity Christian, and he won a national champion. He won a state title with Shedeur Sanders at quarterback before he even. I think he was the offensive coordinator. He was either the offensive coordinator or the head coach. I'm not sure. He won those two. He won all those two titles. But he ends up wanting to coach at Jackson State. And look, I said, look, he can have that job. Like, I'm not mad at him because he has coaching experience. So I get why they give him the job. I say that because Eddie George steps on the scene. And not knowing, nobody seen him coach, nobody heard of him coaching before, with no coaching experience. And he takes the Tennessee State's job as a head coach. And they know that they were looking for a coach. And Eddie George, if you saw his press conference, he spoke about him growing up in Tennessee for the last 25 years. And I think he spoke about him playing for the Oilers because they were in Houston, and how they transferred over from Houston to Tennessee, and their home games they played at Tennessee State. So that's where, that's where he said he kind of got his love for Tennessee State. And so he always known about him. So he said that's where his love kind of came from for Tennessee State, and that's why he was interested in taking the job. And I wasn't mad at him for that. But then you started hearing Ed Reed and Ray Lewis' name pop up and wanting to coach at HBCUs now. And that was 7 or 8 months ago that Ray Lewis' name was in talks of wanting to coach at an HBCU. Not just last week, not just on Wednesday or Thursday when he was fighting for that position for Grambling State, but we'll get back to that. So, Coach Prime, now Coach, everybody is up. Jackson State is on ESPN every single week during the spring season. And you heard coaches chirping. You heard, and mind you, I totally forgot, and a lot of y'all reminded me in the comments. It was like, yo, the coach for Alabama A&M said, go get more 4-stars. And turned around in the regular season and spanked their ass with them same 4-stars that he told them to get. So, and I was totally shocked by that. Now, if you're hearing Coach Prime in interviews speaking about names on the back of jerseys, speak about money games and how it kills the morale and how you're getting money, like you're getting thousands of dollars, hell, even millions of dollars playing this high-powered team that you probably know that you have no chance of beating, but you're taking the matchup because you're getting money out of it. And Coach Prime, he's seen that. But up until then, you never heard nobody talk about it. And I find it so profound that he says it because, look, me playing in HBCU when I was going to school, look, we've been in plenty of money games. I just never realized it. So if you will always have 1 or 2 teams on your schedule that you know that you just couldn't beat, but because you were getting money out of it, you'll play them. Even though, like, the coach would be, in film rooms, would say, oh, you can do it. And they're being there, like, and they know damn well that it's not happening. And you can even count on two hands how many times an HBCU team actually beat an FBS team. Me personally, it hasn't happened enough. And I think because that happened, look, we all know like years ago in the 50s, 60s, black players wasn't allowed to play at the FBS schools. We had no choice but to play at HBCUs. And guess what? Players was goddamn good. I did a video about the top 10 HBCU dynasties of all time. And we're talking about the early 50s of Southern, in the early 50s of FAMU, and in the late 70s of FAMU. These schools, even a decade long of dominance from Grambling State. Multiple times where Grambling State was dominant. And you saw a change happening after the early 80s, mid 80s. You saw a change happening because black players were starting to be allowed to play at Alabama and LSU. It started happening. So there had been more black players getting away from HBCUs and wanted to get the resources that they were getting at these big time schools. So that's where we saw a change happen, and it stayed that way for 30 years, for the past 30 years, ever since the mid 80s. It was happening. So there's been a lack of recruiting. And when I say recruiting, I mean aggressive recruiting. I'm talking about getting those All-American JUCO players. Getting the 3-star from Florida, the 5-star from Texas. Hell, going out west and getting big-time players who can damn near change that team off of one player. A lot of HBCU schools are scared. They've been scared to do it for a long time. And Coach Prime stepped right in and got James Houston, got Aubrey Miller, and got his son who played at an SEC school, got him to transfer, got Malachi Wideman out of Tennessee. And you know what started happening then? Now you started getting, A&T started. A&T wasn't really getting those type of players until Coach Deion stepped on the scene. If y'all saw it during the summer, not even to Jackson State, you saw the players that FAMU was getting, the players that A&T was getting. And now you saw Bethune-Cookman get those type of players. And it wasn't just Jackson State getting the players. It started to trickle down to everybody else because Jackson State was probably getting a whole lot of them. And it got to a point where now players were transferring to other SWAC schools to not play for Deion, but to play against them and to meet them at the end of the game. And I'm going to say this too. Exposure over experience. We're going to fast forward to the end of the season. Or, I'll say mid-season. I didn't understand why Alabama State fired the coach that they had midway to the season. I didn't understand why Grambling State decided to fire their coach the week before they played Southern in the Bayou Classic. Didn't understand it. And at the end of the season, it made sense. Nobody knew who Eddie Robinson was. Well, the majority, I wouldn't say the majority. I'll speak for me. I didn't know who Eddie Robinson was. And when you read what they spoke about him, they said they ain't say nothing about no head coaching experience. Ain't said nothing about it. But he played for Alabama State. And if y'all heard his press conference, He spoke about his NFL career. He spoke about how he played 11 years in the NFL. He spoke about how he played in the Super Bowl with Tennessee. He spoke, he spoke about his experience at Alabama State. And then he got to the people that he's been speaking to, the calls that he's been making. If you saw Hugh Jackson and him being introduced as Grambling State's new head coach, he spoke about the history of Grambling State. And you just saw this damn near the entire press conference. You saw him reading. And I advise y'all to look at the difference. I don't know, this may not mean unto nobody, but I just advise y'all to look at the difference in Coach Prime's press conference, Eddie George's, Eddie Robinson's, Hugh Jackson's. I just advise y'all to just go back and look at those press conferences and y'all tell me the difference in what y'all see. And we see how Coach Dancy at Mississippi Valley State. Let's speak about Valley State for a minute. First of all, I empathize with Valley State. If there's any school in the SWAC that I empathize with the most, it's Valley State. They have, in the last 10 years, they've definitely been the doormat in the SWAC, winning one game, two games, one game, two games, back to back. No winning seasons at all. Now, this year, they've been competitive. They were competitive in the SWAC in every game they played in. They won the most games in the last 10 years since 2012 when they won 5. They won 4 games. They beat a Fairview team that played in the SWAC championship game the week after. You can say that Fairview wasn't prepared. You can say, anybody can say anything they want to say, to give any type of excuse for Fairview as to why they didn't play to their full potential. But Valley State made it look that way. Caleb Johnson is still there. So the running game is going to be there. And you see what he did at the end of the season? They went and signed 4 JUCO transfers and 1 transfer from Southern Miss. Coach Dancy has been putting in absolute heavy work since the season ended. Hugh Jackson done went and offered scholarships to big-time All-American players at JUCOs already. Let me say this. We've heard more news, and it's crazy, that a lot of people hasn't really cared. You know what? Hold up, scratch that. I'm going to say this. If Eddie George, for some reason, scratch all that. If Eddie George came out and said, I want to coach at an HBCU, if he did it first, I don't think the needle would have been moved. I don't think there were people that would cheer, but a lot of people wouldn't care. I wouldn't think. If Eddie Robinson came and did it first, said, I'm coaching at HBCU. If Deion Sanders was not in the picture and Eddie Robinson or Eddie George came out and said, I want to coach at an HBCU, and they got introduced, it wouldn't be big news, personally. It wouldn't move the needle. It wouldn't matter. You wouldn't see a whole bunch of 3-star and 4-star recruits transferring over to Tennessee State or Alabama State. You wouldn't see it. Deion Sanders has the luxury of not only his NFL career and the pedestal that we put Coach Prime on, because he's the best cornerback in NFL history. Top 3, in my opinion, top 3 best defensive players of all time. And For him to have those type of stats, and for him to have the personality that he has, his personality fits HBCU football. It fits because he's very braggadocious. He has a certain arrogance about him. He's very confident, and he's marketable. He markets his team. If anybody follows Coach Prime on IG, he's on there every single day. From his speeches to showing the people that he's meeting, to showing some of his practice clips, to showing a picture of his coaches in the film room, to just having fun with his players. And if you saw how many NFL players went to JSU's practices, hell, Troy Aikman went to Jackson State's first game in the spring. You had a bunch of you just had a bunch of players, a bunch of former NFL players get the support for Prime that dare I say it transcended everybody else. The Coach Prime effect is real because it's forcing everybody to recruit better. Nobody is going to go after the 3-star and 4-star recruits if Coach Prime don't do it. And I think for years there's been lazy recruiting. And now Coach Prime is forcing everybody to recruit better because, they don't want Jackson State to dominate for the next 4 and 5 years. And that's the type of attention that Jackson State is gonna demand because Coach Prime is there. You see how many FBS teams, how many schools came out and wanted to interview Coach Prime to take him away from Jackson State. And I said this before, if Coach Prime don't coach for Jackson State for another game, he's already done enough. He did his job. He brought the 4-star recruits to play at an HBCU. Like, he already had the most dominant team in the SWAC. He did that just off of his presence alone. But the fact that he just has that personality that fits HBCU head coach. It fits. But if you saw how many schools were going after Coach Prime, it lets you know how good of a job he was doing. And I don't know if Coach Prime interviewed for the TSU job. I don't know that. But they didn't come out and say, no, I didn't. They left everybody wondering. So, and you can say that, he's a traitor. He's a sucker. I knew Coach Prime was going to leave. And nobody has no idea what was happening. So, let's say this. I think that HBCU football is on the rise, and it's because of that man. It's because of Coach Prime. It's because he already brought more 3-star and 4-star recruits than damn near probably everybody in the SWAC. Combined, probably. And James Houston's about to be gone. Aubrey Miller, Keontae, Josh Lanier, Warren Newman, Keith Corbin, and he's about to reload on the talent he's losing to get more talent. Look, let me say this. He is about to stack up on 4-star recruits, and I'm gonna say this. If he gets a 5-star recruit, and I believe it's going to happen one day. I don't believe it's happening this year. I honestly don't believe it's happening next year. But if there's a day where he gets that 5-star recruit, I think everybody else in HBCU football is going to get a 3-star, 4-star recruit as well, because he's forcing everybody to recruit different. He said himself, he's not scared to go after the 5-star recruits. He's not scared to go after that All-American at JUCO. Hell, Hugh Jackson just did it 2 days after being introduced. He already did it. So now you have Hugh Jackson, who's been in the NFL, who's been an NFL head coach for years, quarterback coach, offensive coordinator, head coach, where you can say that he's had a bad NFL career. Hell, Nick Saban had a bad NFL career, I'll say. But look at what he's doing in Alabama. And you can say, and I've seen people say that it wasn't a good hire to hire Hugh Jackson. I believe it was a perfect hire. It was absolutely perfect. Grambling State is about to be in the thick of things from day one. If you see the recruiting that Hugh Jackson is doing already, because he knows talent. He knows talent. It may not have transferred into the NFL. Oh, but it's definitely going to transfer into SWAC. Grambling is going to be very different. It's going to be very different. In the last 5 years that you see Grambling, it's going to be very different. That all that the running quarterback stuff, you ain't gonna see it. You're gonna get the NFL pro style type of playbook. Grambling State's gonna be different. Jackson State is still gonna be dominant. FAMU is gonna be great. Hell, Mississippi Valley State may get an actual winning season. Not just in the conference, but I'm talking about overall record. A lot of people don't know when the last time that happened, but Mississippi Valley State is going to be very competitive. And you've seen how busy the transfer portal is. Imagine some of those players from LSU, from Oklahoma, who had their coaches leave to go to other schools. Imagine those players go to HBCUs. Because it's already happening to where every school, Texas Southern just signed her 3-star corner. They just signed him. Texas Southern didn't have a good season last year, yet they're signing 3-star recruits. You know why? Because the recruiting is being more aggressive now, because it demands it. The recruiting process is at an all-time high for HBCU football right now. It's at its highest peak than it's been in the last 30 years. And that's because Coach Prime made it that way. If he don't coach for another game for Jackson State, he's already done his job. And you know what would have really been crazy? If Grambling State would have chose Ray Lewis over Hugh Jackson. Why was Ray Lewis's name even in the conversation with Hugh Jackson when Hugh Jackson been a head coach at an NFL level, been an offensive coordinator, been a quarterback coach, yet Ray Lewis, who don't have coaching experience, is in the same job category as Hugh Jackson? It's telling. Exposure over experience. Don't matter. Look, I think Ray Lewis will be an excellent head coach. I think the needle would be moved if he actually becomes a head coach at a school. You can, like, his game day speeches, his intensity, him being one of the greatest NFL defensive players of all time. you will be able to feel his presence because he demands that. You know what? You know who else would move the needle if they decided to wanted to be a coach, even though they don't have the experience? Shannon Sharp. I think Shannon Sharp will be an excellent coach at an HBCU. Hell, if he went back and coached for Savannah State, his alma mater, like, he has that same braggadocious style, that same swagger about himself, that same fun, jokey kind of attitude that HBCU players would love to engage. Like, but like Hugh Jackson don't have that demeanor. Eddie George don't have that demeanor. I don't know who Eddie Robinson is, but I'm pretty sure by his press conference, he don't have that demeanor. But Coach Prime is HNIC. Coach Prime is the HNIC of HBCU football. And whenever he speaks, you gotta listen. When he speaks, you gotta listen. Look, Shedeur Sanders is gonna be there for another 3 years. Shiloh got 2. You got some other guys he recruited for JUCO. And look, I'm gonna say this too. Coach Prime may turn Jackson State into the next DB Nation. Like, and he recognizes that, look, playing in the secondary has damn near the hardest position on the field. Because you have to go one-on-one with their best playmakers at wideout. Sometimes you're going to be on the island. Sometimes you're going to be man on by yourself with zero coverage, with all blitz. And you have to be the man on that island to play one-on-one with that receiver. And that's probably their best receiver. He knows what it takes to play in the secondary. So you know what? He's getting the best JUCO corners. He's getting 3-star, 4-star recruits and putting them all in one team and taking them to the NFL. James Houston will be drafted. Aubrey Miller will be signed. And it's gonna be a time where it's gonna get to a point where I'm saying this. I changed my stance on the Celebration Bowl. I had it to where I don't think the Celebration Bowl is gonna be available in the next 4 or 5 years because Coach Prime may demand it to not be there because he wants to play for a national championship. I changed my stance on that. I think the Celebration Bowl is going to be bigger soon. It's going to be bigger than the FCS championship. Well, I won't say that. I'll say than the FCS playoff. I think the Celebration Bowl is going to be bigger than the process of getting to the championship. I think y'all, and I know y'all know this. Coach Prime generated $30 million in Jackson, Mississippi. $30 million. And you know what? It can rise up. Like, each and every year, it can rise up. So, whatever Coach Prime is doing in Mississippi is working. Because now it's going to force everybody's antennas up. It's going to force everybody else to be better. It's going to force everybody else to recruit better. Alabama A&M is not going to be that team to beat next year. Hell, Quill Glass is gone. They already have a first team all conference receiver going to Bowling Green. So I don't see that offense is going to be totally different. You know, and FAMU is going to be different, but I think they are going to have a good recruiting class because Coach Simmons, he's going to demand that attention too. But everybody in the SWAC is just going to be better. And I believe Coach Prime demands that. So I see a change coming. A change is already here if nobody sees it. And like I said before, HBCU football being in the stock market, people need to put their money in HBCU football. People need to just come on the wave of HBCU football because it's happening. It's happening right before our very eyes. People are being more and more interested in HBCU football. You're going to see a lot more HBCU football on ESPN. Not just ESPNU, ESPN 35. No, ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN3. Like, you're going to see a lot more of those games. And the moment that we get more recruits going to HBCUs than Alabama and LSU, hell, and look, in order for things to happen, you sometimes are going to have to endure the difficulties of being at an HBCU. Look what happened with Percy Miller. Master P just took his son out of Tennessee State because of the lack of resources. But you knew that before you even brought your son to an HBCU. You knew that HBCUs had a lack of resources. And I'm going to say this, look, in order for you to want to change something, you have to be willing to endure the difficulties on what it takes to go to an HBCU. Look, you know how many times dorm rooms have been redone because of the damages? You know how many times we left out of pissy bathroom because niggas was just stupid, getting drunk on a Friday, Saturday night, not cleaning up? You know how many times rooms has been broken into because it's been real easy to break in rooms? And that has to change, but that's been happening in HBCU dorm rooms, not just Livingstone. In the many campuses that I visited, we hear the same story about how many times rooms have been breaking into, breaking curfew. Shit been happening. And even when, Coach Prime told the story in the press conference about how his bag got took. Within, it might have happened in the first game or the second game, one of those two games. It was definitely the first 3 weeks of the season because he won that game. And he couldn't celebrate because his bag got took. Lack of security. Lack of resources. He don't know if it was an inside job, if he knew that his bag was left there, but that's just the lack of security, aka lack of resources. And sometimes you're gonna have to endure those type of issues in order for you to change the culture. I've been a part of HBCU football for over 10 years. And it's made me a student of where we came from. And there's been a lot of NFL Hall of Fame players come from HBCUs. It's been a lot of it. And, like I said, for the last 20, 25 years, it's been doormats to a lot of these schools. And we have Coach Prime coming to change all that. He's coming to change all of it. So now, we may see less and less money games. Having us take less and less money games. We may eventually give out money games. We may eventually be the ones to give away money. So I think there's a change happening in HBCU football. It's definitely happening. And you see it in these in this last hire with Hugh Jackson. But it started before that. It started way before that. You know, and you just see it. So the recruiting process is definitely going to get better. We already know everybody is going to recruit better because of it. But yeah, man, I think, dog, next season is going to be absolutely crazy. The Celebration Bowl, I think, is going to be absolutely nuts. We see a lot of firepower individually between both teams, but I think a lot of us probably know who the best team heading into the Celebration Bowl is. I'll give my I have a few previews I'm going to give about the game eventually, but we're going to talk about it. So, but definitely can appreciate you guys, man. Make sure you guys, like I said, make sure you guys like, subscribe, comment, and share. I appreciate you guys. I know I was rambling on. I was just saying whatever I had in my head, but I definitely appreciate you guys, man. Take care of yourselves. Enjoy the weekend. But the Celebration Bowl is here. It's here, baby. Yes, sir. Appreciate you guys.